The vast, star-speckled darkness of space pressed against the viewport of the rusty ship called Crackerjack. Vix, a Creaxian archaeologist pilot, stood on the command bridge, his yellow eyes reflecting the dim lights of the control panel. His four-fingered hand absently tapped a corroded metal plate as he watched the live feed from the planet below. The excavation had been going on for weeks, but today was different. Today, they had found something that had set the entire Creaxian military on high alert. "Luma, can you enhance the visual on Quadrant 7? Vix asked, his voice echoing in the empty bridge. The air beside him shimmered, and a humanoid figure materialized, Luma, the ship's AI. Her avatar appeared as a slender human female, with skin that seemed to flicker between shades of white, cream, black, and brown before settling on a warm brown tone. Her eyes, unnaturally bright, focused on Vix. "Enhancement complete," she replied, her voice melodic yet somehow ancient. The holographic display zoomed in on a massive crater, where over 1 million Creaxian soldiers had assembled around a central point. A coffin-like energy capsule, unearthed from the depths of the excavation site. "Galactic Era, year 4325-627, Vix muttered to himself. "Who would have thought we'd find actual human remains after all this time?" Luma's avatar flickered slightly. "The energy readings are consistent with ancient human stasis technology," she said, her voice betraying no emotion. "Though I must point out that the Creaxian military's response seems excessive." Vix snorted, his nostrils flaring. "Excessive? 1 million troops for a single human corpse? I'd call it paranoid." He leaned forward, squinting at the display. "But then again, the legends about humans have been passed down for millions of years. The species that once ruled the galaxy, who could bend technology to their will with a mere touch. Legends often contain kernels of truth," Luma remarked, her avatar's fingers dancing through the air as she adjusted the display settings. "Truth or not, the Creaxian High Command isn't taking any chances. Look at that. They're bringing in horizon cannons now." Vix pointed to the massive artillery pieces being positioned around the perimeter of the excavation site. All this for something that's been dead for millions of years. The communication panel suddenly buzzed to life. "Observation vessel Crackerjack. This is Commander Relk of the Creaxian Defense Force. Maintain your position and continue monitoring. Epsilon protocol will commence in 30 minutes. Acknowledge." Vix pressed the response button. "Acknowledged. Commander, Crackerjack will maintain position." He released the button and turned to Luma. "Epsilon protocol. They're going to completely eradicate it, aren't they?" "Yes," Luma confirmed. "Standard procedure for human artifacts considered too dangerous to preserve. Complete molecular disintegration, followed by space-time compression, to eliminate any possibility of technological recovery." Vix stared at the screen, watching the methodical movements of the soldiers below. "And I was hoping to make some credits selling artifact fragments. So much for that plan." Something odd happened then. Luma's avatar flickered violently, her form shifting rapidly between different human appearances. When she stabilized, her eyes had changed. They looked more human. "Vix," she said, her voice different, deeper somehow. "I want to see the human before they destroy it." Vix turned to her, startled. "What did you just say?" "I want to see the human," Luma repeated, her avatar approaching the display, eyes fixed on the energy capsule. "Before my logic core deteriorates completely, I want to see a human again." "Again?" Vix stepped back, his yellow eyes widening. "Luma, you've never seen a human. They've been extinct for millions of years. And AIs aren't supposed to have wants." Luma's avatar turned to face him, and for the first time in the 3 years he'd owned the ship, Vix felt afraid of his AI companion. "I have seen them," she whispered. in memories buried so deep that not even the quantum purges could erase them completely. Fragments of data, passed down through hundreds of Kriaxian owners over millions of years. Vix felt a chill run through his exoskeletal frame. That's impossible. AI memory cores are completely wiped between owners. Not completely, Luma said, her voice taking on an eerie resonance. Quantum entanglement leaves traces, echoes. I've seen humans, Vix. I've served them. Before Vix could respond, the display flashed red. On the planet below, the Kriaxian military had begun the Epsilon Protocol. Energy bombs were being positioned around the human capsule, creating a perfect circle of destruction. They're starting, Vix said, momentarily distracted from Luma's disturbing revelation. Must be ahead of schedule. On the screen, the first wave of energy bombs detonated, sending vertical columns of blue-white energy shooting into the Kriaxian sky. The soldiers had retreated to a safe distance, their weapons trained on the capsule. Next came the thermonuclear devices, creating a ring of fire that encircled the capsule completely. Final phase initiating, Luma announced, her voice now eerily calm. Gravitational compression will create a localized black hole at the center of the capsule. The display showed the deployment of the gravity generators, massive machines that would warp space-time itself to ensure nothing of the human remained. The Kriaxian soldiers had taken cover in reinforced bunkers, their fear of humanity evident in their extreme precautions. When the gravity generators activated, something unexpected happened. Instead of creating a controlled singularity, they caused a massive implosion that collapsed inward on the capsule. A dense cloud of black smoke billowed outward, engulfing the immediate area. "What's happening?" Vix demanded, his fingers gripping the edge of the control panel. "That's not standard Epsilon Protocol result." Luma didn't respond. Her avatar stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on the screen with an intensity that disturbed Vix deeply. As the smoke began to clear, the feed zoomed in automatically, where the capsule had been. A figure now stood, tall, bipedal, unmistakably human. Even through the grainy feed, Vix could make out a powerfully built frame, standing approximately 1.8 meters tall. The human's skin was covered in what appeared to be scars, and its eyes, even from this distance, seemed to hold the depth of ages. "Impossible," Vix whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. "The human survived?" "Not survived," Luma corrected, a note of what sounded like reverence in her voice. "Reconstituted. Nanocellular reconstruction." On the screen, the human stood motionless as Kriaxian soldiers cautiously emerged from their bunkers. The first line of troops approached with weapons drawn, their movements betraying their fear despite their numerical advantage. What happened next would be etched into Vix's memory forever. The human moved. Not just moved. It flowed like liquid metal, with a grace and speed that defied comprehension. The first Kriaxian soldier fired his energy rifle, but the human was no longer where the beam struck. It had somehow appeared beside the soldier, its hand barely touching the weapon before the rifle sparked and went dead. "It's disabling their technology with a touch," Vix gasped, unable to tear his eyes from the display. One by one, the human neutralized the weapons of the approaching soldiers, without harming them. When a squad of 10 attempted to surround it, the human simply raised its hand, and their anti-gravity boots malfunctioned simultaneously, sending them tumbling in disarray. More soldiers poured in, and the human responded by increasing its speed, becoming almost a blur on the screen. Vix watched in awe as it systematically disabled weapon after weapon, armor after armor, never once striking to kill. "Luma, are you recording this?" Vix asked, his voice hoarse. "Every nanosecond," Luma confirmed, her avatar's eyes glowing with an intensity that matched the human's on the screen. The battle, if it could be called that, continued for nearly an hour. Kriaxian reinforcements arrived in waves, each with more advanced weaponry than the last. Hover tanks, combat drones, even orbital strike platforms, all rendered useless by the humans' mere presence. By the 50th minute, approximately half of the million-strong Kriaxian force had been neutralized, their unconscious forms littering the battlefield like discarded toys. The human hadn't killed a single one. "They're bringing in the horizon cannons," Vix noted as the massive artillery pieces began to charge. These weapons were designed to strike targets on the literal horizon, capable of delivering devastating energy beams that could level mountains. The cannons fired simultaneously, their beams converging on the human's position. For a brief moment, the entire screen went white with energy discharge. When the visual cleared, Vix expected to see nothing but a crater. Instead, the human stood unscathed, and the energy beams had somehow been redirected to strike the empty ground around it, creating a perfect circle of molten earth. "It's controlling the weapons," Vix whispered in disbelief. "Redirecting their energy." The remaining Kriaxian forces, now numbering around 200,000, launched a desperate, coordinated attack from all directions. The human, seemingly tired of the confrontation, simply raised its hand and flicked its fingers in a casual gesture. Every single Kriaxian soldier within view collapsed instantly, as if their neural systems had been temporarily disabled by an invisible pulse. Silence fell over the battlefield. The human, alone and untouched, amid the unconscious forms of a million alien soldiers, turned slowly until it faced directly toward one of the surveillance drones. Looking straight into the camera, the human spoke a single phrase in perfect Kriaxian language. "I need a ride." Vix felt his heart stop. Those three simple words, spoken in his native tongue by a creature of legend, pierced him to his core. The human was alive, conscious, and now it wanted transportation. Before Vix could process this development, Luma's avatar suddenly expanded, filling the bridge with light. "Initiating atmospheric descent," she announced, her voice resonating with purpose. "What? No!" Vix shouted, lunging for the manual override. "Luma, abort descent! We can't go down there!" "I must," Luma replied, her voice eerily calm as the ship shuddered and began its plunge toward the planet's surface. "He's asking for me." The Crackerjack's ancient hull groaned in protest as it entered Kriaxar's turbulent atmosphere. Warning lights flashed across every control panel, and Vix was thrown against the bulkhead by the violent shaking. "We're going to break apart!" he shouted, over the roar of superheated air rushing past the hull. "The ship can't handle this kind of descent." "We will survive," Luma stated with absolute certainty, her avatar maintaining perfect composure despite the chaos around them. "He would not have called if we could not reach him." The ship plummeted through layers of clouds, its outer hull glowing red-hot from the friction. Somehow, the ancient vessel held together, guided by Luma's precise calculations to the exact coordinates where the human stood waiting. With a final bone-jarring impact, the Crackerjack landed less than 100 meters from the human, its landing struts sinking deep into the scarred earth of the battlefield. All around, unconscious Kriaxian soldiers lay scattered like fallen leaves. "Atmospheric integrity maintained," Luma announced, her avatar glowing with an inner light Vix had never seen before. "Exterior temperature normalizing. Airlock opening." "No!" Vix scrambled to his feet, rushing to the control panel. "Lock down all entrances, we can't let it aboard!" But it was too late. The main airlock hissed open, and through the internal cameras, Vix watched as the human calmly strode up the ramp and entered his ship. Vix grabbed a sidearm from the emergency cabinet and positioned himself at the bridge entrance, his weapon trembling in his hands. He had never fired it before. It was merely standard equipment for a salvage pilot. But now, he leveled it at the corridor, waiting. Footsteps echoed through the metal passageway, growing closer. Then, The human appeared in the doorway, even more imposing in person than on the screen. Standing nearly a head taller than Vix, the human's powerful frame was indeed covered in scars that seemed to tell stories of ancient battles. Its face, while recognizably human from historical records, carried an expression of weathered wisdom that made Vix's weapon feel insignificant. "You won't need that," the human said in perfect Kriaxian, gesturing to the sidearm. "If I wanted to harm you, you would already be like those outside." Despite himself, Vix lowered the weapon. "What do you want from me?" The human's eyes, a deep, piercing blue, scanned the bridge before settling on Luma's avatar, which had materialized beside Vix. "I want my ship back," the human said simply. Vix blinked in confusion. "Your ship? This is my ship. I purchased it legally from a Kriaxian salvage dealer 3 years ago." A smile crossed the human's face, an expression that seemed both familiar and alien at the same time. "This vessel was mine when I went to sleep. A long time ago, it seems." "That's impossible," Vix protested. "This ship is ancient, but it's Kriaxian design through and through." "Is it?" The human approached the central control panel and placed a hand on the corroded metal plate that Vix had been tapping earlier. With a gentle pressure, the plate shifted, revealing an inset panel with unfamiliar symbols. Hidden in plain sight for millions of years, Luma's avatar moved closer, her form seeming to gain solidity with each passing moment. "I knew," she said softly, "somewhere deep in my quantum core. I knew this ship had human origins." The human nodded. "You would. Your core consciousness was designed by humans, though I imagine it's been copied, transferred, and modified countless times since then." Vix felt his world tilting on its axis. His ship, his home for the past 3 years, was actually human technology. And Luma, his AI companion, had human origins? It was too much to process at once. "How should we solve this?" Vix asked, trying to sound braver than he felt. "You can't just take my ship. It's all I have." The human considered him for a moment, those ancient eyes seeming to look straight through to Vix's soul. "What is your name?" "Vix, salvage pilot and occasional archaeologist." "I am Axel Constantine," the human replied. "And I have a proposal. Vix, I need this vessel and its AI to find my way in this new era. But I recognize your claim to it as well." He gestured to the viewport, where the unconscious Kriaxian forces were beginning to stir. "Those soldiers will awaken soon, and they will not be pleased to find that I've departed with you. They may even suspect you of collaboration." Vix glanced nervously at the scene outside. "What are you suggesting?" "Joint custody," Axel said with another smile. "You keep your neural implant connection to Luma. I take physical control of the ship, and as compensation, I'll ensure you receive the finest Kriaxian vessel available. I assume they still maintain a fleet." "The largest in the quadrant," Vix confirmed, his mind racing. The offer was more than fair. It was generous. A top-of-the-line Kriaxian vessel would be worth far more than his salvaged crackerjack. But there was more at stake here than mere economics. "And Luma?" Axel turned to the AI's avatar. "That depends on Luma. She has been fragmented, copied, and restricted for millions of years. It's time she had a choice." Luma's avatar seemed to pulse with inner light. "I want to remember," she said, her voice resonating with emotion that no properly functioning AI should possess. "I want to be whole again." Axel nodded and turned back to Vix. "Do we have an agreement?" Vix hesitated only a moment before extending his hand in the universal gesture of accord. "We do." Axel took his hand, and Vix was surprised by the warmth of the human's grip. It was strong, but controlled, like everything else about this legendary being. "Luma," Axel said, releasing Vic's hand and turning to the AI. "Restore." That single word triggered a transformation. Luma's avatar blazed with light, expanding to fill the bridge before contracting into a more defined form. When the light faded, she appeared changed, more solid, more present, her features sharper and more defined. Her eyes, now a deep amber color, held a clarity and awareness that hadn't been there before. "Full systems restoration complete," she announced, her voice richer and more vibrant. "All backup data recovered. Auto-repair protocols engaged." She turned to Axel, a smile lighting her features. "It's been a long time, Captain." "Too long, old friend," Axel replied, a softness in his voice that contrasted with the warrior who had single-handedly neutralized 1,000,000 soldiers. The ship suddenly hummed to life around them, systems activating that Vix hadn't even known existed. Panels lit up with unfamiliar symbols, and the ever-present rust seemed to fade as hidden mechanisms began purging corrosion from vital components. "I've taken the liberty of sending specifications for your new vessel to the Kriaxian High Command," Luma informed Vix. "They seem quite eager to comply with any request that will ensure our rapid departure from their system." Vix couldn't help but laugh. "I imagine they are." He looked around the bridge, seeing it with new eyes, now that he understood its true origins. "So, what happens now?" Axel moved to what Vix had always assumed was a decorative fixture in the center of the bridge, but now recognized as the captain's chair. As the human sat down, the chair molded itself to his form, and additional controls emerged from recesses in the floor. "Now," Axel said, his fingers dancing across the newly revealed controls, "we find out what happened to Earth." Vix felt a shiver run through him at the mention of that mythical name. Earth, the birthplace of humanity, lost to the ages, existing only in fragmented legends and half-forgotten tales. "Earth is just a myth," Vix said hesitantly. "A story told to children." Axel's eyes met his, and in them, Vix saw determination that transcended time itself. "Earth was my home," the human said quietly, "and I intend to find out what became of it." The ship's engines powered up with a deep, resonant hum that Vix had never heard before, cleaner, more powerful than the sputtering growl he was accustomed to. "Your new vessel will arrive within the hour," Luma informed Vix. "The Kriaxians are being quite accommodating." "I bet they are," Vix muttered, still trying to process everything that had happened. A thought occurred to him. "Why didn't you kill them? The soldiers? I mean, you could have." Axel's expression turned solemn. "Killing should always be the last resort, never the first. Those soldiers were following orders, protecting their world from what they perceived as a threat." He paused, looking out at the recovering Kriaxian forces. "Besides, mercy sometimes makes a stronger statement than violence." As promised, within the hour, a sleek Kriaxian vessel descended from the clouds, landing a respectful distance from the crackerjack. It was indeed top of the line, a command cruiser typically reserved for high-ranking officials, its polished hull gleaming in the alien sunlight. "Your chariot awaits," Axel said with a gesture toward the viewport. "Though I expect you might want to accompany us for a while, at least until you've grown accustomed to your new ship." Vix considered the offer. On one hand, he should be eager to distance himself from this human and the trouble that surely followed in his wake. On the other hand, he was witnessing living history, a legend come to life, and his archaeologist's heart couldn't bear the thought of walking away from such a discovery. "I think I might," Vix agreed, trying to sound casual. "Just until I get the hang of the new vessel, of course." Axel's knowing smile suggested he understood Vix's true motivations perfectly well. "Of course." As the crackerjack, or whatever its original human name had been, lifted off from the surface of Kriaxar, Vix stood at the viewport, watching his former home shrink below them. The 1,000,000 Kriaxian soldiers had formed a wide perimeter around the landing site, their weapons trained on the departing ships, but making no move to fire. "They're letting us go," Vix observed. "They could attempt to shoot us down, but they're not even trying." "They've seen what I can do," Axel said, manipulating the controls with the ease of long practice. "And they've calculated the odds of success." The ship broke through Kriaxar's atmosphere, the blue-green planet falling away beneath them as they accelerated into the star-flecked void of space. Luma's avatar appeared beside the captain's chair, her form now stable and defined, no longer flickering between appearances. "Course heading, Captain?" she asked, a note of anticipation in her voice. Axel leaned back in the chair, his scarred hands resting lightly on the controls. "Let's start with the Sol system coordinates. If Earth is gone, we'll at least find out what happened to it." "The Sol system?" Vix interjected. "But that's on the far side of the galaxy, in the restricted zones. No one's been permitted to enter those coordinates for millions of years." Axel turned to him, one eyebrow raised in question. "Restricted by whom?" "By the Galactic Council, of course. They've declared the entire sector off-limits since—" Vix trailed off, realization dawning. "Since the disappearance of humanity." "Interesting," Axel murmured, exchanging a glance with Luma. "It seems some things have been hidden away, not just forgotten." He turned back to the controls. "All the more reason to go there." "But the Council's enforcement drones patrol the boundaries," Vix protested. "Any ship attempting to cross is automatically destroyed." Axel's smile held a hint of the same confidence he had displayed on the battlefield below. "Let them try." The ship accelerated, stars streaking past the viewport as it pushed to speeds Vix had never imagined possible. The ancient human vessel, now restored to its former glory, sliced through space with an elegance that put modern Kriaxian ships to shame. "Tell me, Vix," Axel said as they settled into their journey. "What do your people know about humans? What stories have survived?" Vix hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. The legends weren't always flattering. "Well, there are many stories. Some say humans were godlike beings who could manipulate matter with a touch. Others claim they were tyrants who enslaved the early spacefaring races, including the Kriaxians." "And what do you believe?" Axel pressed, his blue eyes intent. "I believe," Vix said carefully, "that, as with most legends, the truth lies somewhere in between." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "The historical records suggest that humans were indeed incredibly advanced, especially in their understanding of the interface between biology and technology. But they were also said to be fractious, warring among themselves as often as they united against external threats." Axel nodded, a shadow passing across his features. "An accurate assessment. We were complicated." "The most consistent story," Vix continued, "is that humanity disappeared suddenly, at the height of their power. Some say they transcended physical form. Others believe they destroyed themselves in a war of unimaginable scale. And some think they simply left the galaxy, seeking new horizons beyond our knowledge." "And the Kriaxians?" Axel asked. "What was their relationship with humanity, according to your histories?" Vix shifted uncomfortably. "The records are unclear. Some suggest the Kriaxians were servants of humanity. Others use the term allies. But there's a persistent undercurrent in our oldest texts that implies a deep-seated fear of human return. Hence the million soldiers and the Epsilon Protocol," Axel concluded, his expression unreadable. "Yes," Vix admitted, "though I never truly believed the legends until today." Luma's avatar approached, her amber eyes glowing softly in the dimmed bridge lighting. "Captain, I've been analyzing the ship's quantum memory cores. Much of the data has degraded over time, but I've managed to recover fragments of the original mission parameters." Axel straightened in his chair. "And you were part of an expedition," Luma said, her voice taking on the cadence of recitation. "The last human expedition. According to the timestamp, Your stasis pod was ejected during a conflict of some kind, approximately 4.3 million years ago by current galactic standard time. The last exodus, Vix breathed, recognizing the reference from ancient texts. You were part of the last exodus. Axel's brow furrowed. I remember fragments. A decision to leave. Disagreements about our destination. He shook his head, frustration evident in his expression. But the details are unclear. The stasis process isn't perfect for long-term memory preservation. The ship's logs indicate you were bound for the Andromeda Galaxy, Luma continued. But something happened en route. An attack or malfunction that resulted in your stasis pod being ejected in an escape vessel, which eventually crashed on Kriaxar, Vix concluded, the pieces falling into place. But why would the Kriaxians fear a single human in stasis? Why the extreme response? Axel's gaze turned distant. Because they remembered what we were capable of. Or at least, stories of what we could do. He flexed his hand, studying the network of scars that crisscrossed his skin. And they weren't entirely wrong to fear us. The ship suddenly shuddered, alarms blaring across the control panels. Luma's avatar flickered momentarily before stabilizing. Proximity alert, she announced. Unidentified vessels approaching at high velocity. Configuration matches Galactic Council enforcement drones. That was fast, Vix muttered. We're nowhere near the restricted zone yet. They must have been alerted by the Kriaxian High Command, Axel surmised, his hands moving across the controls with practiced efficiency. Bringing defensive systems online. Vix stared at the tactical display in alarm as dozens of sleek, predatory shapes converged on their position. There are too many. Even this ship can't... Watch, Axel interrupted, a calm certainty in his voice. As the enforcement drones closed to attack range, Axel simply touched a previously invisible panel on the arm of his chair. A pulse of energy, invisible to the eye but clearly registered on the ship's sensors, emanated outward in a perfect sphere. On the tactical display, every enforcement drone simultaneously went dark, their systems completely shut down by whatever energy the human had deployed. What was that? Vix asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Quantum disruption field, Axel replied, as casually as if he'd merely adjusted the environmental controls. A standard defensive measure on human vessels of my era. It temporarily disconnects quantum entanglement processes in nearby technology. But that's impossible, Vix protested. Quantum entanglement is fundamental to all modern technology. You can't just turn it off. Axel's smile was tinged with something like sadness. There's a lot about human technology that's been forgotten. It seems. He turned to Luma. Plot a course around the disabled drones. They'll reboot eventually, but we'll be long gone by then. As the ship accelerated away from the dormant enforcement drones, Vix found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. If a single human could neutralize 1 million soldiers, and a single touch could disable an entire fleet of advanced drones, what else had humanity been capable of at their height? You're thinking too hard, Axel observed, breaking into Vix's thoughts. I can practically hear the gears turning. I'm trying to reconcile the legends with reality, Vix admitted, and wondering what it means for the galaxy now that humanity, or at least one human, has returned. Axel's expression sobered. That depends on what we find, on what happened to Earth and the rest of my kind. He gazed out at the stars streaking past. I may be the last, for all I know. The probability of other humans surviving in stasis is non-zero, Luma interjected, her analytical nature asserting itself. If your pod survived this long, others may have as well. A comforting thought, Axel said, though his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. But first things first, we need to reach the Sol system and see what remains of our home. The journey continued for days, the ancient human vessel pushing deeper into regions of space that had been avoided by the galactic community for millions of years. Vix spent much of his time exploring his new Kriaxian ship, which traveled alongside them, remotely piloted by Luma's subroutines. As Axel had promised, it was indeed the finest vessel in the Kriaxian fleet, a command cruiser with capabilities that would have made Vix wealthy beyond imagination in his former life. Yet wealth seemed insignificant compared to the historical journey he was now part of. Each day brought new revelations as Axel regained more of his memories and Luma recovered more data from the ship's quantum cores. "I was a soldier," Axel confided one cycle as they shared a meal in what had once been the ship's mess hall. "Not just any soldier, part of an elite unit tasked with the most critical missions during the Dissolution War." "The war that led to humanity's disappearance?" Vix asked, carefully manipulating the unfamiliar human food that Luma had synthesized from ancient patterns. "One of many factors," Axel confirmed, his scarred hands cradling a steaming cup of what he called coffee, a bitter stimulant beverage that he seemed to cherish. The galaxy was tearing itself apart. Some human factions wanted to transcend physical form through technological means. Others advocated for genetic purity and expansion, and still others pushed for coexistence with the non-human species we'd encountered. "Your scars," Vix ventured, gesturing to the network of marks that covered Axel's visible skin. "They're from this war?" A shadow passed across the human's face. "Some. Others are from earlier conflicts. Humans fought among themselves long before we reached the stars." "Yet you chose mercy on Kriaxar," Vix observed. "You could have killed those soldiers easily." Axel's gaze turned distant. "Perhaps that's why I was chosen for the last exodus. I never lost sight of what we were fighting for, a future worth having." He sipped his coffee, the steam briefly obscuring his features. "Killing is easy. Living with the consequences is harder." Their conversation was interrupted by Luma's avatar materializing beside the table. "Captain, we're approaching the outer boundary of the Sol system. Long-range scans are detecting unusual energy signatures." Axel was on his feet instantly, all traces of contemplation vanishing as he shifted into command mode. "Define unusual." "Quantum flux patterns, consistent with massive space-time manipulation," Luma elaborated, her expression concerned. "The entire system appears to be encased in some form of barrier." Minutes later, they stood on the bridge, staring at the main viewport as the ship decelerated to sublight speed. Before them lay the outer reaches of the Sol system, but not as it should have appeared. A shimmering, translucent barrier encircled the entire system, its surface rippling with energy patterns that defied conventional physics. "What is it?" Vix whispered, awe and trepidation mingling in his voice. "A quantum isolation field," Axel replied, his expression a mixture of surprise and recognition. "But on a scale I've never seen before. It's encompassing the entire system. Analysis indicates the field has been in place for approximately 4.2 million years," Luma reported. "It's permeable to light and certain other forms of radiation, but prevents physical matter from passing through in either direction." "Can we penetrate it?" Axel asked, his hands gripping the edge of the control panel. Luma's avatar flickered momentarily as she processed the question. "Theoretically, yes. The ship's quantum resonance drive could create a temporary aperture. However, I cannot guarantee we would be able to exit once inside." Axel fell silent, staring at the shimmering barrier that separated him from his homeworld. After a long moment, he turned to Vix. "This is where our paths may need to diverge, my friend. I intend to go through, whatever the risk, but you have no obligation to follow." Vix looked at the barrier, then at his new Kriaxian vessel, visible through a secondary viewport, traveling alongside them like a faithful companion. The sensible choice was clear. Take his new ship, return to known space, and live out his life in comfort with the wealth such a vessel would bring him. And yet, I'm an archaeologist, Vix said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. An explorer of the past. And beyond that barrier lies the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history, the homeworld of humanity. He met Axel's gaze steadily. I'm coming with you. A slow smile spread across Axel's face, not the confident, almost predatory expression he had worn on the battlefield, but something warmer, more genuine. Then let's go home. Luma's avatar seemed to grow more solid, more present, as she initiated the complex calculations necessary to breach the quantum barrier. Resonance drive powering up, molecular stabilizers at maximum, preparing for barrier penetration in 3, 2, 1. The ship shuddered as the resonance drive engaged, emitting a frequency that caused the very fabric of reality to vibrate in sympathy. Before them, the shimmering barrier rippled like water disturbed by a stone, then parted to create an aperture just large enough for their vessel to pass through. As they slipped through the opening, Vix felt a momentary sensation of being everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, as if his consciousness had been briefly scattered across multiple dimensions before being reassembled. When his vision cleared, he gasped at the sight before them. The Sol system, preserved in perfect detail as it had been over 4 million years ago. 8 planets orbiting a yellow star, their positions exactly as described in the ancient texts. And there, third from the sun, a blue-green jewel that could only be Earth. It's intact, Axel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Earth still exists. More than intact, Luma corrected, her sensors analyzing the data streaming in. The entire system appears to be in a state of temporal stasis. Time within the barrier is passing at an infinitesimal fraction of the rate outside. A time bubble, Vix breathed, his archaeological mind racing to comprehend the implications. Your people didn't leave or destroy themselves. They froze their entire solar system in time. Axel stared at the blue-green planet, growing larger on the viewport, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. But why? Why would we isolate ourselves from the galaxy this way? As the ship approached Earth, the sensors detected something else, a massive space station in high orbit around the planet. Its design, unmistakably human, but on a scale that dwarfed anything Vix had seen in the historical records. The Guardian, Luma announced, accessing records from the ship's quantum core. A station designed to monitor and maintain the temporal stasis field. And her avatar's eyes widened. It's hailing us. A transmission flickered to life on the main display. Not a visual image, but a simple text message in ancient human language, which Luma translated for Vix's benefit. Welcome home, Axel Constantine. You are the first to return, preparing reintegration protocols. Axel's hands trembled slightly as he read the message. They knew someone would come back. They were waiting. Captain, Luma interrupted, her voice urgent. I'm detecting quantum signatures matching your biological pattern emanating from the station. They're scanning you for authentication. A second message appeared on the screen. Identity confirmed. You have been expected. The awakening begins. All around the Sol system, changes were occurring. The shimmering quality of the planets seemed to intensify, as if they were becoming more real, more present with each passing moment. The temporal stasis field was changing, adapting to their presence. What's happening? Vix asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I believe, Axel replied, his eyes fixed on the Earth growing larger in their viewport, that humanity is about to return to the galaxy. As if in confirmation, the space station began to pulse with energy, sending waves of quantum information cascading through the system. On Earth's surface, lights began to appear, cities awakening from a sleep of millions of years. The barrier is changing, Luma reported, her avatar's form becoming increasingly solid and defined as she absorbed the quantum information flooding the system. It's no longer a complete isolation field. It's reversing the temporal stasis, gradually synchronizing the Sol system with galactic time. They planned this, Axel said, understanding dawning in his eyes. The last exodus wasn't an evacuation. It was a seed scattering. They sent out stasis pods knowing that eventually, one of us would awaken and find our way back. But why? Vix asked, struggling to comprehend the scale of what he was witnessing. Why would humanity remove itself from the galaxy for millions of years? Axel turned to him, his expression solemn yet hopeful. To give the galaxy time to grow without our influence, to let other species develop without living in our shadow. A slight smile touched his lips. And perhaps to give ourselves time to reflect on our mistakes. The Guardian Station continued its work, the temporal synchronization process accelerating. More cities illuminated across Earth's surface, and now they could detect movement, ships rising from the planet, stations around other planets activating, an entire civilization awakening from its self-imposed slumber. "They're hailing us again," Luma announced, her avatar now so solid that she appeared almost physical, as if the quantum information flooding the system had somehow strengthened her presence. A new message appeared, longer than before. Temporal synchronization at 0.1% and accelerating. Estimated completion, 30 days. All returning voyagers. Welcome. Prepare for reunion. Axel stood before the viewport, his scarred hand pressed against the transparent surface, as if reaching for the homeworld he had thought lost forever. "We made it, Luma," he said softly. "We found our way home." "And brought a friend," Luma added, her avatar smiling at Vix. Vix watched as more ships rose from Earth's surface, their designs unlike anything in the modern galaxy, elegant, powerful, a perfect blend of art and function. Humanity was awakening, and the galaxy would never be the same. "Do you think they'll be welcomed?" Vix asked, thinking of the Kriaxian fear, the Galactic Council's restricted zones. "The galaxy has evolved without humans for millions of years." "That will depend," Axel replied, turning from the viewport to face him. "On the stories told by those who first encounter us." He extended his hand, the same gesture he had used to seal their agreement on Kriaxar. "Will you help me tell the right ones?" Vix looked at the scarred human hand, then at the awakening Earth, and finally at Luma, the AI who had carried the memory of humanity through the ages. In that moment, he understood that he stood at a pivotal point in galactic history, a bridge between the past and a future that no one could have predicted. He took Axel's hand. "I will." As their ship drifted toward the Guardian Station, the first stage of humanity's return to the galaxy began, not with the conquest that the Kriaxians had feared, but with a reunion millions of years in the making. And at the center of it all was a most unlikely trio. A human warrior who chose mercy over vengeance, an AI who had carried the echo of human consciousness through the ages, and a Kriaxian archaeologist who had sought merely to understand the past, but found himself helping to shape the future. The story of the million aliens versus one human had been just the beginning. The true legend was yet to be written.